Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amit Harari, and coming up in today's newscast. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu successfully undergoing pacemaker surgery at Sheba Medical Center. Meantime, judicial reform plans sparking unprecedented demonstrations and military reservists uprising. And finally, Israel's Operation Firebirds coming to Greece's rescue amidst devastating wildfires. Just before the dramatic vote on the cancellation of the reasonableness bill and a week after he was taken to hospital after feeling unwell, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu underwent a procedure last night to implant a pacemaker at Sheba Hospital. The procedure was successful with no complications, as Netanyahu will remain at the cardiology department for observation.
לפני שבוע שמו לי מכשיר ניתור. המכשיר הזה צפצף הערב ואמר שאני צריך לקבל קוצב לב. ואת זה אני צריך לעשות עוד הלילה. אני מרגיש מצוין, אבל אני מקשיב לרופאים שלי. עד לדקות האחרונות אני מדבר עם עמיתי, עושים את הסידורים להמשך, מקווה שתושג הסכמה, אבל בכל מקרה, הרופאים אומרים לי שאני אהיה חופשי, אחרי הצהריים כבר, אשתחרר מבית החולים, אוכל להגיע לכנסת להצבעה. תודה לכם.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has undergone successful surgery at Sheba Medical Center in Ramat Gan to have a pacemaker implanted. This comes just a week after he was hospitalized for dehydration and had a heart monitoring device fitted. The decision to perform the medical procedure was made after an abnormal indication was received from the cardiac monitoring device that was implanted in Netanyahu's body last Sunday. The transplant was performed by Professor Roy Beinert, director of the Davidai Center for Arrhythmias and Pacemakers, and Professor Eyal Nof, director of the Invasive Electrophysiology Service at the hospital.
We decided to go ahead and perform an electrophysiological study, which is a kind of catheterization that assesses the conduction system. The catheterization went well and all the results were fine. That's why we decided to implant this implantable loop recorder, which is kind of a 24/7 monitor that detects his heart rate on a daily basis.
During Netanyahu's surgery, Justice Minister Yariv Levin acted as the Prime Minister. As Netanyahu hasn't appointed a permanent acting Prime Minister, Levin's appointment was approved through a phone vote. The Knesset is set to debate the reasonableness bill, a part of the government's judicial reform, which has sparked significant opposition. Despite the surgery, Netanyahu hopes to be released in time to participate in the crucial votes on the bill. In the meantime, the cabinet meeting and security discussions were postponed due to the surgery.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
It's been a dramatic day in the Knesset with the debate underway ahead of the highly contentious vote on the reasonableness bill. Many thousands of protesters are camped outside the Knesset in opposition. Meanwhile, last-ditch efforts are underway to find a compromise to avoid the mass resignation of thousands of IDF reservists. ILTV's Steve Leibovich reports.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters took part in demonstrations this weekend against the coalition's judicial reform plans. Protests are ongoing in Jerusalem. Tens of thousands are rallying outside the Knesset as the coalition remains steadfast in its determination to pass the reasonableness bill as early as tomorrow. The mass demonstrations came as over 10,000 IDF reservists, including pilots and others in top military units, announced they were halting their service if the motion passes. The threats of the reservists to refuse service has created more pressure on the government to halt the legislation, while also increasing the coalition's determination, with members of Netanyahu's government saying they cannot, under any circumstances, give in to what they call blackmail by members of the military and a dangerous precedent. Prime Minister Netanyahu and Chief of Staff Herzl Levy have reportedly discussed the mass refusal's ramifications. There are also threats of strikes by various professional groups, and the Histadrut, Israel's largest labor union, is considering launching a general strike. The government of Prime Minister Netanyahu appears undeterred, with coalition officials saying they would not capitulate. Netanyahu insists that he is searching for compromise.
גם ברגעים אלה, אני מבקש לומר לכם, שנעשים מאמצים להגיע להסכמה על עילת הסבירות. אני מאוד מקווה שהמאמצים האלה יצליחו. אבל גם אם לא, דלתה של האופוזיציה, של הקואליציה, תישאר פתוחה תמיד. לכם אזרחי ישראל וגם לאופוזיציה. כי גם בימים הסוערים ביותר, אנחנו זוכרים, ואני תמיד זוכר דבר אחד. אנחנו עם אחד, עם גורל אחד, אין לנו ארץ אחרת.
The coalition bill would become the core text for one of Israel's quasi-constitutional basic laws. The bill is expected to clear extensive filibusters to become law, in line with the coalition's goal to show movement on the judicial reform program before breaking for legislative recess on July 30th. After 7 straight months of the most sustained and intensive demonstrations the country has ever seen, the protest movement has reached a fevered pitch. Some 90,000 people took part in the final leg of the march to Jerusalem, completing a 4-day, 45-mile trek from Tel Aviv to the Knesset. Members of the students' protest group set up a tent city in Soccer Park adjacent to the Knesset, with protesters planning to remain there until further notice.
But we're also very, very hopeful. We've met so many people here who really, really, truly believe in a democratic country, who will come out and camp out and be out in the streets and do whatever there needs to be done. So I'm very hopeful.
Much can still happen in the hours ahead of the Knesset vote. All eyes are on the Knesset and the next moves of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And joining us now to give us a broader perspective on both the political and military aspects is our panel for today. Former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and Senior Fellow with the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Brigadier General Reserves Yossi Cooper-Wasser, and Jerusalem Post political correspondent Eliav Brewer. Eliav, we're starting with you. This is a very fluid political day. Where does the legislation currently stand in the Knesset?
So the legislation is currently, the reasonableness standard bill has, debate has started. It started at 10 o'clock this morning, and it's scheduled to last 26 hours straight until 12 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, after which there'll be a few hours of voting. And then if nothing happens to the bill, it's scheduled to pass into law tomorrow at some point in the afternoon or early evening.
Are there any signs that a compromise can be reached before the deadline, maybe?
So there are a lot of different reports coming out of from different angles. We have reports from the Histadrut, from Israel's largest labor union, of Arnon Bar David, who's the head of the union, publishing just a couple hours ago a proposal for compromise that the Likud struck down. And there's also been a number of other compromises on the table. It's important to understand, though, that the wording of the bill can no longer change because the bill's already been finalized in the relevant Knesset committee. The only way for there to be any change to the bill is if the coalition agrees to support and vote in favor of one of the objections put forward by the opposition. So it's almost a technical back channel to try to get compromise at the last minute.
Yes, now Eliav, many thousands of protesters are camped outside the Knesset in general over the country. Might there be problems maintaining decorum inside and outside of the Knesset?
I'm actually sitting in the Knesset right now, and it's eerily quiet. The security here has been ramped up, so they're only letting in people with permanent pass holders. So I definitely think it's going to be loud outside the Knesset. Might even be heard in the Knesset's hallways, but I don't think anybody's to worry about any attempts to actually physically obstruct the procedures.
And what happens politically and in the streets in the hours and days after the law passes, if it does, of course?
Excellent question. I think that the streets, I don't know if there'll be a change. We'll probably just see more of the same.